Most people believe that discipline is the problem. They tell themselves that they need more willpower, more structure, more consistency, more grit. And so they try harder. They wake up earlier, they push themselves, they white knuckle habits into place. And sometimes that works for a while, but eventually discipline breaks down. Not because the person is lazy, not because they lack character, and not because discipline doesn't matter. Discipline fails because it's being asked to do a job that it was never designed to do. Discipline is not a creator, it's a stabilizer. And when identity is not aligned, discipline turns into force. Here's the misunderstanding that most people never question. They assume that discipline creates change. That if they can just hold the line long enough, reality will eventually bend. But discipline doesn't create direction, it doesn't create meaning, and it doesn't create identity. Discipline only sustains what already feels coherent. When discipline is fighting identity, it feels heavy. When discipline is supporting identity, it feels natural. That difference explains almost every cycle of burnout, relapse, and inconsistency that people experience. Think about the moments when discipline actually worked for you, not the moments where you forged yourself, the moments where things felt strangely stable, where effort didn't feel like punishment, where consistency didn't feel like resistance. In those moments, discipline wasn't dragging you forward. It was protecting something that you already believe you were. That's the distinction most people miss, most systems miss. Discipline fails when it's compensating for identity. When someone says, I just need more discipline, what they often mean is, I'm trying to behave like someone I don't yet believe I am. That creates friction, because behavior will always default to identity under pressure. You can override identity temporarily, but you cannot override it indefinitely. Eventually, the system corrects, not because it's broken, but because it's coherent. This is why so many people experience the same pattern. They start strong, they feel motivated, they make progress, and then something shifts. The effort gets heavier, the resistance increases, the excuses get louder, and discipline turns into a battle. At that point, most people blame themselves. But the issue is not effort. The issue is that discipline has been promoted to a role it cannot sustain. In Alignmentism, discipline lives downstream. Identity lives upstream. That hierarchy matters. Identity answers the question, who is this normal for? Discipline answers the question, how do I protect what's already normal? When discipline is upstream of identity, it becomes force. When identity is upstream of discipline, it becomes structure. That's the difference between burnout and stability. Force always shows up when alignment is missing. If you feel like you're constantly pushing yourself to do things you should do, that's feedback, that's not failure. Force is not proof of strength, it's proof of misalignment. It's the system telling you that behaviors being propped up instead of supported. This is why discipline-heavy advice often collapses over time. It treats resistance as a moral flaw instead of a diagnostic signal. It says, try harder, push through, be more consistent. But consistency without coherence creates stability. You can't discipline your way into a new identity. You can only discipline what identity already endorses. That doesn't mean that discipline is useless. It means that discipline is precise. Discipline works when it's reinforcing an identity you're already practicing. It fails when it's trying to replace identity entirely. And that's a crucial distinction. So here's a simple test. If discipline feels like self-respect, it's aligned. If discipline feels like self-punishment, it's compensating. Aligned discipline feels clean. Compensatory discipline feels heavy. Same behavior, different structure. This also explains why discipline advice often works for some people and not others. Two people can follow the same plan, One stabilizes, the other burns out. Not because one is stronger, because one's identity is already compatible with the behavior. The other's trying to borrow discipline to cover a structural mismatch. Identity doesn't eliminate effort, but it changes the quality of the effort. Effort shifts from resistance to reinforcement, from forcing to protecting, from I have to this is who I am now. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Most people don't fail because they stop trying. They fail because discipline keeps fighting the same upstream contradiction. And eventually the system chooses relief over consistency, and discipline loses, not because it was weak, but because it was alone. So the question is not, how do I become more disciplined? The real question is, what identity would make this behavior feel normal? And once that question is answered, discipline stops being the engine. It becomes the guardrail. And guardrails don't need motivation to function. They just need to be in the right place. This is why identity-based change doesn't feel dramatic. It feels quiet. The resistance lowers. The need to negotiate disappears. The behavior stabilizes. Not because you're pushing harder, but because the system no longer needs force to move. Discipline is not the hero. Identity is. Discipline is the structure that protects alignment once it exists. When identity leads, discipline follows naturally. When discipline leads, force eventually appears, and force is always a symptom. If discipline keeps failing you, don't try to strengthen it. Listen to it. It's pointing upstream.